Thanks, Sean. Hi, everybody. I just had a religious experience listening to Mark out there, because he's right. As a CEO, to hear that, I lived through a lot of angst I did. It was a great talk. And it's a hard thing to come up here and talk about a company that ran its course for you. So I'd love to give him another round of applause for, I think, just an amazing talk. All right, so CEO, co-founder of Glympse, a local startup here, mobile location sharing at a high level. Let me kind of introduce myself, and we're going to talk about, and I think Mark, it was actually a great segue into this. We're going to talk about advice, about taking advice. And my premise here is, you know, if you don't take advice at some point about your company, you just can't succeed. And at the same point, if all you do is take advice, you're not going to succeed. So I want to talk about maybe a little bit contrarian of some of the advice you should listen to and maybe some you shouldn't. So kind of the right guy, I think, to give this talk would be your typical entrepreneur, right, from Stanford or Harvard or MIT in their mid-20s, probably down in the Bay Area with a track record. So kind of against that backdrop, I went to the University of Utah. I'm in my 40s. I'm obviously in Seattle. Never done a startup before Glympse, right? Long-term middle management suck up at Microsoft. Thank you. So that's my caveat. I won't spend the rest of the time saying, oh, maybe you shouldn't listen to me. Decide, maybe you shouldn't listen to me, but that's my background, so take it for what it's worth. Okay, so what I want to do is just kind of go through the phases chronologically of a startup. We could talk probably for an hour about any one of these, but I'll just pick out one or two kind of common conventional wisdom advice pieces and then talk about what my experience has been and some of the decisions we had to make as a company. So you get your, am I going to do a startup? You jump and decide, here's my idea. Hopefully you raise money, you build a team, you sell it, and then you talk about how smart and wonderful you were. It's kind of the path that we all have in our minds when we start off. Okay, so I actually gave a talk a while ago that I didn't know was being recorded, but John put up on GeekWire, where it was about a 10-minute talk about, really, you shouldn't go do a startup. At least 7 minutes of it was. So I'm going to give you that in about 30 seconds, just as the background about whether or not you should do a startup. Part of this has to do with, I want to deal with the advice. Because if a lot of you are thinking about doing it, or maybe thinking about doing it a little bit heavier, you're going to talk to people and what do you think? I think a key element of knowing what advice to take is knowing that person you're talking to, knowing what their background is, knowing what their bias is, and probably the validity of their response. So let's take a look at some people. Mom. Yeah, that Zuckerman boy did it, and you're smarter than he is, so sure you should go do it, right? My mom was a big supporter because I was the smartest kid at school in her mind, so yeah, go do a startup. Friends, right? Your friends are going to like your idea, I promise. They're not going to say that's dumb. They're going to like, little Napoleon Dynamite here. Follow your heart and your wildest dreams will come true, okay? So they're supportive. That's what they're supposed to be. That's why you're friends. Don't take their advice to go do a startup as the gospel. Entrepreneurs, those of us here, right? Yes, please, join us. Be an entrepreneur like us. Please, please, be a startup, right? We want this ecosystem to thrive. So of course we're going to be supportive. We're optimistic by nature. We're supportive by nature, right? We reach far by our nature. So yeah, almost any entrepreneur you talk to is going to want you to kick off your startup. Consultants and people and expertise, they're also going to want you to do a startup. Not because they just want your business, but because that's the ecosystem they're in. And VCs are like, or angels, they'll also kind of say yes, right? They probably won't give you money, but they'll tell you it's a great idea, just doesn't quite fit their profile. And then VCs, you're lucky if you can get to talk to them while you're still thinking about if you're going to do a startup. Okay, so my don't do a startup advice, right, is you will likely make less money, right? If you're smart enough to do a startup, you can probably work in some corporate environment, make more money. You'll have fewer friends, less free time, and more stress. I can guarantee that. Your family will suffer. I don't mean that like they're going to suffer, but you will probably have a less robust family life than you would have had otherwise. Your health will probably suffer worse than it would have otherwise. You'll be lonely as a CEO, right? It's a tough spot, right? And the only people that really get are other CEOs. And like, I love the roller coaster analogy, right? You're going to have a whole bunch of people all excited, counting on you, and you have to decide if that roller coaster still has track on it. Success has 1,000 mothers, and failure, they say, is an orphan, but no, failure is tied to you as a founder, right? It's just, that's the nature of the beast. And you're gonna have to live with that, good or bad or in between, and maybe you can deal with it as gracefully as Mark did. Okay, so why would you do a startup? I don't know, but it's something a little abstract. But I saw a postcard when I was in France when I was 20 that has stuck with me forever, especially when I get a little philosophical. So loosely translated from French, it's a ship in the port has nothing to fear, but is that the destiny of a ship? Okay? So if for whatever reason, because you're bad at math, or you're a masochist, or because you're just aspirational, or you really think that you've got what it takes to do a startup and you go do it, let's jump to the next stage. Is your idea delusional or brilliant? Okay? It's really hard to know, right? And you're not going to be able to tell just by polling people. There's this little tangent that you kind of take off the normal beaten path that makes it brilliant and somewhere between crazy and naive. And that's your judgment that's going to have to decide where that is. But I would say just when you talk to people about your idea or what you're thinking of doing, you're not going to get unanimous consent on it. Okay? So when you, actually let me go and talk about that for, well, we'll talk about that in a second. So now you're building a product, and you might do this in different order. Maybe you got funded early, maybe you build a prototype, but let's assume you're starting to build your product, right? And you're gonna get a lot of advice from people who use it or don't use it or use something like it in terms of what you should do. And there's really important things you need to be able to do in terms of incorporating feedback. But as a leader of a company with a vision, you've got to have some confidence in yourself about what your insights are and where things are going to be in the future. So I didn't make this up, but I remember hearing it. If you asked a Porsche owner what they want, okay, what do you not like about our product? Give me more leg room, I don't really have enough room for my golf clubs, a little safer, a little smoother. And if you did that, then you build them a Volvo. Okay? So you've done something in just listening to people that might not get you where you want to be. All right, so now you've built this product, you've got it kind of going, you've got a little bit of traction, and now you got this pitch deck, right? And you're going, and you're gonna get a lot of advice at pitch deck, and you should spend a lot of time on it, and there's gonna be a lot of people. But I'm telling you, having done a lot of pitches, everybody's got a different angle. And maybe it just, this is just talking about, you know, what do you lead with, right? And if you lead with one, it'll go bad and somebody say, I really didn't get the product, you should have talked about that first. And then you'll do that and they'll go, yeah, I didn't know if the team could execute it. And then you'll put the team first. You have to really work on that, and frankly, you're gonna get a lot of different answers. One of the early pieces of advice I got, which I ignored, I was at a game conference in Europe, and it was Deo Rossi who said, make sure you, your first investment pitch, make sure it's one you don't care about, because you'll screw it up. And make sure somebody else is in the room to tell you how you screwed it up. I remember going, yeah, that makes sense, but I've done a lot of presentations, and I screwed up the first one and the second one and the third one. I've probably done 100 now, and I still change it because I still have elements that I screw up in there. All right, one of the questions you've got, and advice you'll get, is where do you raise seed money from? And a lot of people say, you know, bootstrap yourself, just get your friends and family first, try to get straight into a super angel, no, go to a VC seed fund right off. And again, you're gonna have to decide what's right for you. What we decided we wanted to do was fairly methodical. I wanted to raise my money mostly from folks that didn't know me, right? I wanted the pressure of having to pitch somebody who was just trying to get a return on their investment, not Uncle Joe, who thought I was a pretty smart guy, so here's some money. And I combined that with, I did want one family member in, and this was some advice I got, which I followed, which actually, in those low times, did motivate me. Uncle Dave, I had to write a relatively small check, but I had Uncle Dave in because I knew at every family reunion I'd have to go talk to him and explain to him why I lost his money if we didn't pull this off. So it was a motivating factor for me in dark times. Okay. This is, I think, an important thing that I didn't understand until I was well into the process. And I use the word, how is your product perceived? Or how is your company perceived? Rather than how is it? Because at the end of the day, perception is reality when you're trying to get a check. And the thing is, it's not good enough to be pretty good, right? Pretty good is a no. Okay, so you've got to be at that top 5, 10 percentile to even get a chance to come back and do a deeper look with somebody. And you got to know that going in, and if you don't structure yourself like that, you'll end up missing the boat on that. So with that background, let's take a look at this. I just made this up. Let's have 3 companies, right? And they went to 10 different VCs, and the VCs rated them on a scale of 1 to 10. How good are you? Okay? So the blues is 7.4 average, the B is a 3.1 average, the C is a 4.4 average. Right? Which company would you want to be on there? B. You want to be B, the lowest average company. Why? Because it peaked. Right? You're not trying to win an average beauty contest. You're not trying to bat 350. You're trying to hit a home run. So if everybody hates you, but one person likes you, you've done it right. So you have to be high risk. You have to be bold. You have to be willing to have a bunch of people say no to you to find the one that likes you well enough to put money in. Okay? So be bold, be risky. Swing for the fences. So there's a lot of companies that stay at that average 7.58 every single time. They can't figure it out. Everybody likes me quite a bit, but I can't get anybody to commit. All right, along that, let's pretend I've got 10 envelopes up here. And it's on a scale of 1 to Facebook, I said. So 10's like this super, super cool idea, right? And 1's this stupid idea. And I was actually trying to think what's a stupid idea, and I couldn't think of one because anything might be cool with the right people. But I put up there, that's Dan Aykroyd with the invisible ninja pedestrian Halloween costume, right? That he pitched on Saturday Night Live. But really dumb. So which idea would you want? If I said, pick up the first envelope. Grab 10, right? Who doesn't want Facebook? And then that's gone. What would you pick for the next envelope? 9, right? And then what would you pick for the next one? 8? I think, no. You don't want an 8. You're better off with a 1 that you can flop with quick and get back to work on something else than this thing that's almost there. It's just always almost there. Right? If you're a tech-focused VC-funded startup, you've got to swing for the fences because that's their motive. That's their modus operandi. And that's who you're working with. Along those lines, wisdom of the crowds, right? If you took all the advice and averaged it out for what you should do, you will by definition end up with a mediocre product and a mediocre company, which is by definition a dead company, right? So you got to pick out what that wisdom of the crowd means and then pick the things that you're going to change, the things that you think you have particular insight into to go against the grain. All right, so now you're building the team. And the conventional wisdom on building the team is hire fast, fire fast. And I've seen a lot of really cool companies do that, and it's what most people do. We don't do it at our companies, especially the hire fast. It depends, I think, on your company and what you're doing. And if I had a sales guy just making phone calls, maybe I would do that. But when it comes to engineers at our company, it's too much to ramp them up, and we put too much on their plate, and we depend on them too much that by the time we found out that they weren't right, it's too late. Right? We had a guy come in, we hired him, we got to deal with BMW, okay? So we want to integrate Glympse into the BMW cars. He's the guy. We sent him down, he did all the architecture, all the programming, brand new guy. If he sucked, by the time we knew it, we were dead, right? So we take a little bit more care on who we hire. We hope that because they're in the long term, because the time you realize they suck is usually after they've built a lot of product and you go out and find it's not maintainable, and then it's very hard to pull back on. So I would say know your needs and then measure twice and cut once. All right, then the question is, you're going to have a bunch of decisions to do. How risky should I be with my company, right? There's something that always bothered me when I'd watch the Olympics, and that was, you know, these guys train their whole lives. These guys are so good, and then they're screaming down the mountain, and that's when they slip off on the bobsled, or they slip off on their skis, or they wreck, or they miss a gate. It's like, how can you practice so much at this stuff, and then the one time you need to perform, you screw it up, right? Then finally, after years and years and years, it hit me. It's not that they choked, right? It's not that they got nervous. It's that because they're in the Olympics and they want to win the gold medal, they push it harder than they probably would normally to maximize their speed going down, right? Because the person who's going to win the gold medal is the person who went outside the boundaries of what they were going to do. So you don't do yourself a favor by saying, I'm going to ski at the rate that's going to give you the maximum average speed coming out of here. You have to push the limits. You have to risk going off the track because, again, it's only that top few percentile that succeed. So this was an example that we had. So we built a company, we had a consumer app, it was doing pretty well, but we hadn't broken out of the pack, right? We wanted to do some partnerships, we wanted to get some high profile distribution, we wanted to prove out this location sharing platform. So some guys from Mercedes had seen our app, called us up and said, hey, come down, we're interested in maybe putting this in some of our cars. Okay, great. So we go down, we've talked to them, put a demo together, and we're meeting with the CEO of R&D for Mercedes North America. And he says, great, this looks really good. It went in better than we thought it would. The technical thing's good. So we're going to white label this technology from you guys and throw it into our cars. Okay? Now for us, for our strategy, and some of the advice I'd seen from companies that had failed, we knew we didn't want to be white label, right? A technology component provider into somebody is a really unleveraged place to be. And then you have to deal with margins and competition, and it's just tough. So sitting across the table from him was a short conversation. It was like, we don't do that. We won't do that, right? We believe there's value in the brand. We believe our technology proves out the brand. And we think it's going to be to your best advantage to have that brand prominent in your cars. 5 or 10 minute conversation. I think he was a smart guy, assessed the situation, because we would have walked, and then I would probably be up here saying, what a stupid thing that was for me to do. It killed the company. So I'm not going to say I was smart. I'm just going to say we did know that we were in a high-risk business, and that while we might have lived to fight another day going white label, we didn't like where that trend was going. So he said, great, we'll put you in the car. So we went to the Mercedes with, I love this picture. This is on their website in Germany. It's Facebook, Twitter, and Glympse. That's our logo there on the right. So I love sending that to our investors and saying, guess which one's not a billion-dollar company that Mercedes is putting in their dash. But the thing that happened with that, with us taking that high risk, risking going off the tracks with that, is it created the precedent. Then we talked to the next company and they're like, well, we'd like to white label you. We're like, no, you don't want to do that. I mean, Mercedes wanted our brand, right? Well, certainly you guys could take it. And this has played out very well for us over the last few years as we've gotten more and more high-profile companies that have taken and integrated our brand without an argument or discussion because they see the value in it. And it's really had a strong effect for us because we took that high risk early on. And then I just added this just because the most recent one was the Samsung watch that we were integrated now with Glympse. But just today, it just crossed the wire that we did a partnership with Verizon. And this was us putting Glympse into the Verizon messaging application. So within the messaging application, you can touch the Glympse button and send a Glympse and have a real-time map inside the conversation. I don't do this to advertise the company. I'm doing this because this was actually a very long-term strategy that we bucked a lot of advice on of don't work with the carrier. They're awful to work with. They'll squash you like a bug. You will never get a deal with them. And if you did, you'll never keep your brand, right? And it's advice we ignored, and all those things were right, except that with enough persistence, we were able to push through on that. All right, one of the other areas along those lines is, like I said, we could say, hey, well, we're super stubborn and that's why we are super focused is the word, is why we've done well. At the same time, the conventional wisdom is, oh, you should be very flexible, right? Pivot, change, adapt. And I think that kind of sense of when should I do that and when should I not has to be a very strong gut feeling of when am I being stubborn and when am I being dynamic with what I should be doing in this space. So one of the things that was super important for me and for our company, because I had no history in the startup world, was kind of this advice that I was able to take from the local entrepreneurs of people that had succeeded and actually people who had failed that I talked to. So, you know, I'd been at Microsoft for a long time on the east side, and I decided to quit and do the startup, and I found out there's a bridge that comes across this lake to this city called Seattle. And inside this place, there's a lot of entrepreneurs, and I would go to every event I could find. Anything like this, anything Northwest Entrepreneur Network put on, anytime there was a Buds and Suds or anything I would go to, and I would try to meet people of whom I knew nobody when I would first walk in, and try to pick their brain. And everybody's got some input, right? Whether they had a successful company, and sometimes more valid was the people who had companies that had failed, and you'd find out why. Especially Microsoft people that had done startups and find out why. And through that, there was a couple things that were really great with that. One, I found Seattle a wonderfully accepting community. I could call people, very successful folks with very busy schedules, and I could get a coffee with almost anybody that I gave a call to. And the advice and the wisdom that I got from those folks was absolutely crucial for what we've done as a company. And I didn't take it all, but I always had a little bit more information that would come in on this. One of the things that was interesting, because I talked to a lot of investors too, there was, I think it might have been Benchmark or Greylock, but it was a very large fund that had done a survey of all of their partners over history of the deals they'd done. Now, some VCs will wait until they have unanimous partnership approval and then they'll invest in your company. Other ones will just wait until it's a majority or even just an advocate. But they took notes on who thought it was a great idea and who thought things were bad ideas. And then they looked back at the history of it. And what they found is the greatest startups were the ones where it was a bifurcated opinion, right? It was something they weren't quite sure of, but somebody saw a spark of something in there, and those are the companies that did the best. So I think it's very good advice for you to be able to suck at as much advice as you can, but know what to take. So the summary, to Mark saying, don't do this, I think he used the word love, I use the word passionate. If you're not absolutely passionate about this, then don't do it, right? If you're like, hey, I want to do a startup and pick up a photography skill as a hobby and I'd love to travel, then don't do it, right? This has to be your top priority in terms of what you're focused on. Seeking advice is mandatory, I think, for success. Taking advice is mandatory, and you also have to know what advice to reject. And with that information and that advice, be passionate, confident, focused, and be decisive, right? You're never going to get a 90% answer. Know when you have 40% to make the call of what your gut tells you. And then I'll just leave with a final phrase that I saw, I think it was Gunsmoke when I was 10, but I never forgot in terms of advice. If one person calls you a jackass, ignore them. And if 10 people call you a jackass, then go get a saddle. All right, thank you very much.
Cool, thanks, Bryan.
Thanks, Sean.
Thanks. Do we have time for a few questions? Were there any questions for Bryan? There's one right here in the middle, I think. If we'll get the mic over there.
Can you give us an example of some good advice you took and some advice that you were glad you didn't take?
Yeah, absolutely. Some good advice I took actually when we, I'll tell you, with somebody here actually, I won't say who, but it's one of the VCs. First time I met with them, sat down, I in my mind thought, hey, I was doing very well at Microsoft. It's a super technical company. I'm going to have people just showering me with ideas and wanting to fund my company. Sat down and he said, tell me about yourself. Well, I did this and this and this at Microsoft. And he goes, this doesn't necessarily fit the profile of successful entrepreneurs for us. And it just hit me like a brick wall, right? I had no idea. And I completely understand what he's saying now, but I didn't at the time. We said, okay, we're going to have to go prove ourselves. So we actually said, we're not going to talk to anybody else about fundraising until we build a product, put it in the market, and show that we can act nimbly and build something that people want. And then we went back out. So I think that was fantastic. On the advice we didn't take, I think this consumer brand piece that we were so focused on was something that we kind of pushed through, and some of these partnerships with these huge companies that we were, auto's the same way. It's like you'll never get a deal with an auto manufacturer. Right? It'll take you years and years, and it just doesn't keep with a startup. And what we looked at this, that's been the case, but it's going to change because things are becoming connected. They're starting to move faster. Software is going to make this a much faster cycle, and so we thought we had some insight, and so we went with it.